So I am obsessed with this Mellotron plugin from Arturia. But why do I even have a Mellotron plugin? Well, a couple months ago I was working on physically modeling pianos in Surge, and I was using my Virus TI as my keyboard controller. And I hadn't been playing a lot of keyboards for the last several years, really, because the Linstrument is my main controller these days. But I was making a piano, so I wanted to use a keyboard, and it was not good. It's a very good keyboard for synth controlling, but it does not feel at all like a piano. And it's also a little old and rickety, and I was like, if I'm going to be doing more stuff like this, I really want a nicer keyboard to be playing with. So I dipped into the old synthesizer fund and got myself a shiny new Arturia Keylab 88. Which is very, very nice. I'm not going to do like a product review on it because I don't have anything to compare it with really. But I'm very happy with it. It feels much more like a piano. It feels much nicer, more inspiring. It puts a spring in my fingers as I play. And I like it a whole lot more than any of my other keyboards. But anyways, it came with some software, and some of that software is really nice. Like there is a Piano V virtual physical modeled piano, which is really excellent. I'm going to be using that a lot, I think. It also came with a Mini Moog V, which is quite nice, and a Analog Pro, which I liked so much that I have uninstalled it and cannot show it to you. It's actually pretty cool. It gives you a bunch of presets from all their different, what do they call it, the V collection, all their virtual instruments. And the problem with it, though, is that you can't really synthesize with any of these synthesizers. You can only play presets, which means it's really, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's not a useful tool. It's just an advertisement for all their other products. So that's all right. Most of those I'm not too interested in, but one of them was the Mellotron. And they were very clever. They named a bunch of presets after one of my favorite albums, Tangerine Dream's Rubicon. And the thing about the Mellotron is these the samples they're using in these voices are the same recordings that they used for the original Mellotron tapes. The way the Mellotron works is it has a a tape strip connected to each key, and it will just play that tape when you press the key. So those are they're the same sounds that they used on Rubicon and like half of all recordings between like 1960 and 1980. Don't check my numbers there, they're probably wrong, but these songs can be found on a lot of different classic recordings. So odds are you're very familiar with at least some of them. And when I listen to the Rubicon sounds, I was kind of hit with this blast of nostalgia. Which ordinarily I do not approve of. I do not care for the feelz. But they were just overwhelming me. And when I started playing this flute, I could kind of I could feel a presence in the room, like Edgar Fruza is standing behind me at the modular synth about to crank up a Berlin School sequence. And I'm working on a new album. I'm in the very early stages of a new project, and I'm still like deciding basic things like what genre it's going to be, or if I can avoid having a genre at all. And so I'm like paying particular attention to the aesthetics of the sound palette that I'm putting together. And when I heard these Mellotron sounds, I was just like, oh yeah, I need those. And it was on sale, so now I have a Mellotron. Which is a much less sinister story than a thumbnail might imply. But there will be conspiracy theories later, if you stick around. As I get into my complaints about this plugin. And I do have complaints, but they should not. I hear a purring cat. I've got both cats behind me, purring. So yeah, I do have some complaints, but they should not override the insane amount of fun that I'm having with this plugin. I guess I should say a little something about what a Mellotron is. I've already mentioned the tapes. It's kind of it's an early sampler. It's the sampler you could get before digital sampling was invented, or at least widespread. So these are real violins and strings and flutes and all that stuff. Recorded by real performers onto tape and then transferred to these little tape strips that they put in a big heavy box attached to a keyboard. And it's kind of neat because it's sort of this thing that could only have happened at a certain point in time and only for a little while. And it gives us this amazing, quirky machine that no one in their right mind would ever build once an easier thing becomes available, which is what happened. But it does have a particular warmth and character to it because of the different technology used that a digital sampler will not have unless it has been specifically crafted like this one to emulate that warmth and character. But it has some cool quirks to it, and one of them is just the sound of tape. And we can enhance the sound of tape here with these flutter and tape saturation controls. And so the strip of tape is only so long, and once it gets to the end it has to rewind, and that makes an audible sound that we can hear if I turn up this mechanics knob. I feel like they're cheating here. This is not supposed to be looping. Yeah, the tapes did not loop back in the day. You got to the end, and then the spring would pull the tape back and rewind it really quickly. So I guess you had like 8 seconds. And there you have the rewind sound, which you probably wouldn't hear on a real recording because I haven't heard it while like listening back to anything, looking for it. But this is a physical, mechanical sound of the machine, whereas you would probably have an electronic line out, which would not pick up those sounds. You'd only get the sound of the tape itself. And not the springs. But I do like these mechanics. I think they have a very musical effect of accentuating the release of each note. And since it's a machine, I like to hear that it's a machine. Although I probably would generally keep this down pretty quiet, just on the edge of audibility, otherwise it becomes very annoying very fast. So you've got the character of a live performance by a real musician of each of these notes on a real instrument. And you've got the character of the machine, which is tape-like and warm and very beautiful in my opinion. Adds a certain color to the sounds, which we can adjust with this tone knob. up the flutter too high. And my first complaint is that this plugin doesn't have any way to get sound from some other source besides these built-in samples. Or your own samples, which I'll talk about in a bit. It doesn't have a way to get any external audio pumping through this wonderful color that it's creating. And that is disappointing because the color is very nice. Also the effects section. I think these effects are quite good. And they have kind of a vintage sound to them. And I'd like to be able to run a guitar through there, or a instrument controlled other synth. But it doesn't quite let you do that. There's a hack though, because you can bring in your own samples. So I could sample my performance of the instrument and then stick it in here and play it on a key. And it would get that color and those effects. It's a kind of a pain in the butt way to do it, but it is doable. Now you do have to be careful with these samples on the Mac, at least. On my M3 laptop, I'm getting it crash when I have this stretch enabled and loop not enabled. I think that's the circumstance that causes it, but I'm not going to test it right now. It will just completely crash Ableton and I have to start over. That's a minor complaint. That doesn't happen on my PC, and usually I'm wanting to use looping. So I think this will be okay. But I'm going to be careful with it because I don't want to crash. But I can play this drum set and it'll transpose to different keys. Let's bypass the effects. I'm going to have some fun with that. But this is a good time to talk about my second complaint. So while the factory presets here are quite nice, what has really got me excited and obsessed with this plugin is making my own sounds. Or rather, since it's a sampler, bringing in sounds that I've already made and getting new instruments out of them. Now this one right here is just one sample for my ocarina and it's being stretched as samplers do across this whole range, and it sounds very nice. But the way the Mellotron works, it doesn't do that. It looks more like this, and this is their factory sound bank, and they have, I think there's like 63 of them here. All the original Mellotron sounds. And each of these notes is its own sample. So you notice as I move from one note to another, the sound has a different character to it because it's a different performance. So I'd like to be able to do that. So I sampled every note of my ocarina, but when I try to bring one in here, I only want this to be one note, but it's covering several, so I drag this in here, and the minimum I can do is 3. And, you know, this is workable, but it's not how a Mellotron works, and that annoys me. And also, I can only have 8 different samples on each of these lines. That also annoys me, and I just don't understand why. Why does it not handle the samples the way that the Mellotron would? Because the Mellotron does not shift the pitches. We do have a knob. But that's just for tuning and effects. It's not using pitch shifting to achieve the pitch of each note. So now I have several different ocarina samples here. Some of them, there's 3 different ocarinas in this set actually. And so I kind of have these zones of each different sound. And it's not terrible. It's not bad. But it's not the way a Mellotron works. And I don't think there's any technical reason that this doesn't have the full functionality you get out of any other sampler, really. Sampling technology has come a long way, and multi-samples are a common thing. And I want one for each note, damn it. Oh, I wanted to also mention that these things are kind of finicky to work with. Like, see, when I drag it out this way, it's dragging that root. And like, I can't tell it exactly where I want the root to be. And sometimes it doesn't let me drag to exactly where I want it. These controls are just very finicky, and it's annoying when you're trying to lay out 8 consecutive samples. If you can't get the root where you want it, you can transpose in here, so it's not the end of the world, but it's just annoying to work with, and I don't understand why. So that brings us to the conspiracy theory, which is that Arturia went to the Mellotron company, who are still making Mellotrons. I believe they're called Streetly Electronic. They're digital Mellotrons now, but they're still making Mellotrons. And the conspiracy theory is that Arturia went to them and said, hey, we want to make this Mellotron plugin. And they said, okay, you can have your little emulation of the stuff we were doing 60 years ago. And you can use all the factory sounds, and you can even use the Mellotron name, but we don't want you competing with us in the space of new Mellotron sounds, because the digital Mellotrons come with new sounds and you can buy new sounds, and these sounds are recorded. First they're recorded on the studio, the same way the old ones were, and then they're transferred to the tape strips, and recorded on the Master Control Mellotron, which is an old style, mechanical, probably very well maintained mechanical Mellotron, just like back in the day, so that while the digital Mellotron might be kind of a glorified sampler, the samples it's playing are authentic Mellotron sounds. And so my conspiracy theory is that there's a legal agreement in place such that you can make new Mellotron sounds, but they're not going to be quite right, and your interface is going to be crippled and poorly designed. Because that's how I feel about this. I have no idea if that's true. If anyone knows, please let us know in the comments. But I feel like I'm having such a good experience with Arturia in general that anytime I run across something that I don't like, I feel compelled to think up excuses for why they did this stupid thing. But while that's a complaint, it's not a deal breaker. I'm having a great deal of fun with these sounds that I'm making. And as far as the finickiness of the sample editor, once I made one preset that worked, laying out, basically I sample the sound every fourth. So D, A, C, F, etc. I save that preset, and now I don't have to mess with these anymore. I just open it up and load the new sample I have that is recorded at the right pitch. So it's an annoyance that really doesn't bother me anymore, because these are just mapped already. So I have a bunch of samples that I took of my modular synth quite a while ago. And these are massively multi-sampled. I wanted it to be as close as possible to having a polyphonic modular synthesizer as I could. So like I sampled every note. And here I can only use some of them, which is sad, but I'm still getting some very nice sounds, I think. And now they have that little bit of Mellotron flavor to them. And so that's part of my obsession and the fun I've been having with this plugin, is just bringing in all these sounds that I made a long time ago. And I've also got a bunch of acoustic instruments I'm playing with. I have my 7-string guitar. bunch of different ocarinas because since I can't really do the multi-sample that I want, I just use each note as its own ocarina. Got a few deducts, and this is not really going to sound like a deduct. Unlike the ocarina, I think the deduct has a particular formant to it, so it doesn't pitch stretch as nicely. It starts to sound like a different instrument as you get farther away from the root note. So this doesn't really sound like a deduct, but I think it does sound quite nice. And I'll just leave you with my favorite. So my previous video was about making human voice sounds in Serum and controlling them with the instrument. So what I did for this one, I got 4 different human voices, controlled with the instrument, recorded each note, mixed them together, and brought them in here. And so this is a synthesized choir, no real human voice in this at all. So yeah, I'm really happy with that one. I'll be using that a lot on the new project. And if you're interested in any of these sounds, I could put together a pack and sell them on my website. I don't know how many people are actually going to watch this or how many people actually would use the Mellotron. But if you would like to use these sounds, let me know in the comments and I will put something together at some point. So is the Mellotron V worth it? It is for me because I really like that. I really like the factory presets. I really like the character of all the sounds through the Mellotron color, as I discussed, and it was on sale, so it was like an $80 plugin rather than a $150 plugin. That's why I bought it, and I have no regrets. But there are other Mellotrons out there that you might want to check out. Although the real Mellotrons, the digital Mellotrons, I think are a minimum of $1,000. So you might want to look for a cheaper plugin. And you can also just download original Mellotron samples for free and stick them in any sampler. I've had some good results playing with those with Ableton's built-in sampler. It lacks some of the niceties of this plugin, but it'll give you those sounds. So I will look for some links to those and stick them in the description if they're still there. And of course, the real Mellotrons are available at digitalmellotron.com. Alright, we'll be back soon with more pigment stuff, maybe something about this piano that they gave me with my piano. And of course, more surge and serum stuff. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're recovering from the snow if you got the snow like I did, which is more snow than I've seen since it snowed back in Snowpocalypse. It's so cold here. Okay, see you next time.